All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Christina Top, Vice President of Marketing and Community Engagement at Sunnybrook Foundation. And I want to thank you for joining us this evening for our third and final event in our Virtual Impact Series. Tonight, we will focus on women in the brain sciences, just in time to mark International Women's Day tomorrow. I'm excited to welcome you to our conversation tonight with a talented panel of women who are breaking, have broken, continue to break, will break barriers. Thanks in large part to donors and supporters like you, Sunnybrook is a global leader in brain sciences. And I personally find it inspiring that we have so many brilliant and accomplished women who are leading the way in the research, education, treatment, and care of the most challenging brain disorders and diseases of our time. Before we begin our session, I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of the land on which we work and live. We recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the land upon which the work of Sunnybrook and Sunnybrook Foundation is conducted. Sunnybrook acknowledges our campuses are located on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Today, this land is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and gather on these lands. Land acknowledgements like this one are only a starting point for both conversation and actions to be taken, something that Sunnybrook is participating in and committed to, as I am. Thank you. Now, tonight, you will hear from 4 exceptional panelists about their research and care with Sunnybrook's Hurvitz Brain Sciences Program. And as you may know, our community of donors is helping to accelerate an exciting capital project, the Gary Hurvitz Brain Sciences Center, which is now under construction, and if you're on campus, you can't miss it. The new center will bring together world-leading research, care for brain and mental health disorders, all under one roof. The integration of brain and mental health expertise, innovation, and collaboration in one unified space is going to accelerate the work that's already happening in the Gary Hurvitz Brain Sciences Program. And our 4 panelists tonight will speak to how this environment of collaboration has impacted them and their research. And as a viewer tonight, you are a vital partner in this important work. Donors like you are making an important difference in brain and mental health care today and helping Sunnybrook invent the future of healthcare. So let's get going. Let's meet our panelists, starting with you, Dr. Aubert, with a short introduction, and then we'll follow alphabetically.
Super. Thank you so much, Christina, and thank you everybody for being here. My name is Dr. Isabelle Aubert. I work at Sunnybrook as a senior scientist with brilliant colleagues, some of them here, and the pleasure to mentor and learn from the next generation of scientists as well. Our research aims to develop approaches for brain health and repair, and we specialize in Alzheimer's disease.
You're on mute, Dr. Black.
Okay, my name is Sandra Black. I'm a professor of medicine in the Department of, in the Division of Neurology, and I'm a cognitive neurologist who started off as a stroke neurologist. And I do research in Alzheimer's and various dementias, as well as brain imaging and putting together the correlation between brain behavior and genetics for many years. And I'm delighted to be part of this prestigious panel. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Jenny Rabin, and I'm a neuropsychologist by training, which means that I study the relationships between behavior, such as thinking abilities and memory, and the brain, so specifically brain damage and disease. And I have the wonderful opportunity to work with the many panelists here tonight. And also, I'm a scientist at SRI, and my research focuses on neuromodulation as well as Alzheimer's disease.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Amy Yu, and I'm so excited to be here. I see that we're almost close to 250 participants. So I am a stroke neurologist. I work at Sunnybrook. I'm an assistant professor of medicine at the University of Toronto, and I'm also a clinician scientist. While I take care of patients with stroke, I also my research is also focused on health services research and provision to see how we're doing across this whole entire province and across our country.
Thank you, all of you, for your introductions. Thank you for being here tonight. I know everyone on this call is really excited to hear from you, and I'm excited for our conversation. A little bit of housekeeping. As our conversation unfolds, I would encourage everyone in our audience to use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask questions if you have them. And there's no need to wait until the end, just enter them in the chat and we'll get, in the Q&A function rather, and we'll get to them, as many of them we can at the end of our discussion. Panelists, fair warning, I'll be watching time so that we have time to get to some of those. All right, let's get started, let's get to it. To start off, I'm interested for each of you to share some highlights of your personal and professional journey and what inspired you to get into brain sciences. Dr. Aubert, I'd like to hear from you first.
Thanks so much. Yeah, brain science was my passion, is still my passion, and it started in the early days of my graduate study at McGill University. One of my inspiration was my grandmother, to get a little bit personal. Like, she lived a healthy, full life without any brain disease till 104. And I basically wanted everybody to live that experience as much as possible. So I did my graduate study at McGill University. I gained my PhD. Then I did my postdoctoral fellowship at the Salk Institute. That was part of my fantastic journey with the world leaders in brain regeneration. Then I returned to Canada and I started working at Sunnybrook. So that was my first job, and I'm still here and loving it. And basically, you know, my main interest was like, how can we repair the brain? And there's a Nobel Prize laureate, Raymond Cajal, who said in the early 1900s, it's impossible, everything is immutable, it will not change, everything may die, nothing may be regenerated. And I said, well, I know he also said that he actually won the Nobel Prize for regeneration. So he also had hope in there. So that was really what drives my research. And at Sunnybrook, with many collaboration and resources that were there, that's where I felt I can launch my career into brain regeneration and get into, you know, that amazing science that we can do.
Love that quote, and for your willingness to challenge it. Dr. Yu, do you want to share your story and your journey and what inspired you to get into the brain sciences?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with Dr. Aubert at Sunnybrook, but I didn't know until this meeting that we're actually alumni of McGill University. So that's where I also did my medical school. And I have to say, I wasn't one of these people who always knew that I wanted to go into neurology. It really grew very organically because I understood by speaking to my patients and taking care of them that the brain and the mind is really make a person who they are. And that's just a function that's extremely important, and to be able to preserve it and restore it when there's illness is really important. And then I went on to the University of Calgary to do a stroke fellowship. And while I was there, we did many, many clinical trials. But one of the studies that were really important was that we showed that using catheters and doing procedures to unblock blood vessels when somebody's having a stroke can dramatically improve their outcome. And so that's when I really launched into my work, which is evaluating health services. When we do know that something works, is everybody getting it? And so that's what motivates me now, to make sure that what we do know is translated in actual care for everybody.
That's a really critical question. Dr. Black, you've recently been recognized as one of the top women scientists, ranking women scientists in the world. And I think that's worth calling out with International Women's Day tomorrow. But do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey and how that all got started?
So I'm actually from Northern Ontario, so St. Marie. And I grew up, with the perspective of the North compared to Southern Ontario. My mother was a nurse and a community activist. My father was an obstetrician and gynecologist, so very, very busy. And three of us ended up as doctors. My brother was a neurosurgeon at Harvard, and I started to be interested in the brain. I remember having conversations with my brother and my dad about right around the time that transplants were happening, if you transplanted a person's brain, obviously a naive question for a kid, who would that person be? Their body or their brain? I decided probably the brain. But I've always been interested in that. And my one sister is a geneticist. My other sister is a singer and choral director and teacher. So I started into biomedical sciences at the University of Toronto. I took a little break because I was hankering for some non-technical things, some sort of philosophy. I actually went to Oxford and did a equivalent of a master's degree in the history and philosophy of science with a focus on 19th century neuroscience. I eventually completed medical school at the University of Toronto and directly went into neurology, which I've never regretted. And I did my postdoc in London, Ontario on kind of brain behavior relationships. And so when I came to Sunnybrook, that was part of my focus. Imaging the brain, understanding behavior, and putting the two together. It turned out that my practice was mostly dementia related to Alzheimer's and other progressive conditions, although I specialize also in post-stroke cognitive problems. As part of what I call research embedded in care, where I was able through multidisciplinary collaboration with medical biophysics and medical imaging, put together a quantitative MR imaging protocol that, along with detailed neuropsychological testing with a great colleague of mine, Dr. Don Stuss, who's now deceased, and the beginning of genetics with Peter St. George Hislop, we were able to put together ways of doing care and research at the same time. From that, I discovered the presence of white matter disease in the brain, and we chased it down to pathology, showing that it has to do with thickening of the veins. I'm still trying to make people understand that. But in the meantime, I've been able to network in many ways with many talented fellow physicians and neurologists and other specialists and scientists, inspired also by Isabelle Aubert's work, of course, and focused ultrasound as well. And so I think that I've been able to have some impact. I've had some leadership roles.
I think that's definitely true, Dr. Black. Fantastic. Dr. Rabin, do you want to close us off with your story?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So when I started university, which was at Dalhousie, I thought I wanted to study philosophy. And that was until I took a course on neuroscience. And that was it. I was completely hooked. And then later on, I found a very specific passion in neuropsychology, which, as I mentioned earlier, focuses on how memory and other thinking abilities are impacted by damage or disease to the brain. I then, after university, I worked as a research assistant for Dr. Donald Stuss, who Dr. Black just mentioned, and that was at Baycrest. And as she also mentioned, he was a leading expert in neuropsychology and just a wonderful mentor. And working with him really only reinforced my passion in neuropsychology. I then went on to complete my PhD in neuropsychology at York University. And then this was followed by a postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard Medical School. And my postdoc work focused on better understanding risk and protective factors for Alzheimer's disease. And if you know someone who's been impacted by Alzheimer's disease, then you know why I focused on this area, and then why we desperately need treatments and we need to make progress in this area. In 2019, I was recruited to Sunnybrook to work as a scientist in the Harquail Center, which also uses focus ultrasound for Alzheimer's disease. And I really couldn't imagine a better place to launch a career in brain sciences. And I think being a woman scientist can be quite challenging, especially when you have small children. But it's definitely much easier when you have supportive colleagues and mentors like I do, and like many of the women here.
Thanks, Dr. Rabin. That's actually a great segue into the next question. So thank you. And fascinating to hear the connections even between some of your journeys. Sunnybrook, as I think our audience will know, is an academic hospital and committed to teaching the next generation of clinical and research specialists. So I'd love to hear how has mentorship and collaboration within the Hurvitz Brain Sciences Program influenced your own research and practice. And Dr. Rabin, you just started touching on that. So maybe you want to continue and then we'll go to the others.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think the most fun part about being a scientist is having the opportunity to work with so many different people, to mentor different people, and also to be mentored. I think the old thought of working alone in a lab is really not how science works these days. And I really feel so fortunate to be able to be mentored and collaborate with some of the best scientific minds in the country. And so Dr. Black, who's on the panel this evening, has been just an amazing mentor to me. She not only welcomed me to Sunnybrook with open arms, but really helped me to find my place here at Sunnybrook and to thrive. So I couldn't think of a better time to thank Dr. Black for all her mentorship. For anybody who has the opportunity to work with her, they know that she not only is an amazing mentor and scientist, but also has a heart of gold. And now as I mentor my own grad students, many of which are women, I just want them to know that they can do anything and go to the top. There's no barriers.
That's a great message. And yes, I think we might hear a bit about Dr. Black's influence tonight. But Dr. Yu, you're a clinician scientist. What would you have to say on this topic?
Yeah, I said, as I mentioned, I was in Quebec and then I moved to Alberta, and then in 2017 came to Ontario. I was recruited to Sunnybrook. And when I came here, I didn't know many people, and Dr. Black has been just, fantastic mentor to me too. And the spirit of collaboration at Sunnybrook, I would say, having gone to many other institutions, I have to say that it's above and beyond here. People are willing to collaborate and to help each other. And if they're not the right person, they will connect you with somebody who will be the right person and help you along the way. So I've been very, very fortunate. My personal mentor is Dr. Moira Capral, and she actually doesn't work at Sunnybrook. She works at UHN downtown. And so that really goes to show how being a university affiliated hospital, when Sunnybrook researchers are being supported, we're also supporting collaborations across the whole city and also across different disciplines. So she's not Dr. Capral is not a neurologist, she's actually a general internist. So when people from different department and divisions come together and work together, I think that's where really magic happens.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I think that's great perspective. Dr. Aubert, you're a senior scientist at SRI. I don't know if there's anything particular to the SRI experience you want to speak to, or, how has mentorship played into your career?
Sure. So first, to all my mentors, thank you, because they shaped who I am today, and we continue to have mentors throughout our life. And it's just wonderful to have these people here also at Sunnybrook. I think for me, as a scientist, what's really inspiring is actually to train also the next generation of scientists. So we have amazing students, trainees, postdoc, technicians that come into the lab, and to see them grow through their journey is something that is really, really, truly an honor and a pleasure. And because many of the panelists already mentioned this cross-disciplinary aspect that we have at Sunnybrook, it's one of our greatest strengths. I think it's very unique, and we can have people that start studying into something that's more related to the world of physics, and then there's biology, and there's the clinical world, and we have actually trainees that have spanned this journey. And I think it really provides an amazing richness of mind and expertise and teamwork that we have here. And that's a lot of fun for me. And I keep learning with all these amazing people.
Thanks. Dr. Black, I feel like you've been called out already as an example on mentorship. So I'm gonna maybe come back to you at the end to close off this question. But I think now that everyone's had a chance to hear a little bit about you all as people and about how you work with other people and how you develop people, I'd love to dive into the next question, the chance to hear and share more about some of your work. So maybe this time we'll start with you, Dr. Yu. Can you tell us a bit more about your work and how it will open doors for future breakthroughs?
Sure, that's a good question. So my work is very much focused on optimizing the provision of health services to everybody, to the entire province. So I focus on, are people who are in extremes of ages, very young and very old, are they getting care that they need? Women versus men, people who live in urban versus rural area. We don't want people to receive different care just because their postal code is different, or because even somebody who's living in urban city Toronto, but who happens to be in cottage country to receive different care. So I really use the big data analysis and data linkage that we have at the Institute of Clinical Evaluative Sciences right in our backyard at Sunnybrook to understand care that's been given and where are the lacunes and how can we improve, how can we meet any gaps. And so to do that, as I mentioned, I see people in clinical care, and when I'm with the patient, my attention is to the patient, but I also interact with knowledge users, with government, with policymakers to see how we can have our systems of care in place. I chair the Hyperacute Stroke Committee with Core Health Ontario, which is part of Ontario Health, the evaluative institution for our Ministry of Health, to see where can we improve stroke. And recently, just volunteering with Heart and Stroke, I was at Heart at the Park, where we went to Queen's Park and met with several of our ministers to advocate to improve policy on youth vaping and improving stroke symptom knowledge and doing a fast campaign on that. So I think I really found my voice in doing the research and understanding care and collaborating with people to improve and to move onwards and forward from that.
I think at this particular time in healthcare, even more important and probably fascinating. Dr. Black, I'd love to hear from you next on this question. Maybe tell us, there's a lot to talk about, but a bit more about your work and how it is opening door for future breakthroughs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the key, so the different sort of pillars of science, you have represented here, for example, Dr. Aubert, who's doing animal models or doing extremely important, work in understanding mechanisms. You've got Amy at the other end, the big picture, with what's happening in the healthcare system writ large. And then myself and Jenny, in some ways, are at sort of in between there, where we're doing clinical studies. Jenny's also doing some population studies across different, ethnicities. And my work really is, I've talked about it already, research embedded in care, so that I kind of learned from my patients, but in return, I gave them the best available care that came from multidisciplinary collaboration. Thinking back, a medical physicist who helped us know how to implement a protocol that was being suggested from Harvard, lots of connections with Harvard. And then a neuroimaging, a neuroradiologist was okay to do it. And that was really magic, because it turned out that this has lasted for 25 years. Now we've gone up to a 3 Tesla versus a 1.5 Tesla. But it was because, and he even actually, the medical biophysicist even lent me a programmer so that we could start programming and develop what turned into our special personalized pipeline that can allow you to quantify a stroke as well as the rest of the brain at the same time as you look at all these different components, like the white matter disease is blotches of white that you see on a certain type of MRI scan, which was very puzzling for a lot of people for a long time. But because we also had collaboration with neuropathology, we were able to follow people to their eventual brain donation and learn that it was really hardening of the deep veins in the brain that was causing leakage and also some effect on the cells that make myelin. So it's been really this collaborative, again, you're hearing collaboration more and more as the night goes on, because we need each other. We have different skills, we have complementary skills. And also, I think everybody here is an important mentor themselves, even at a more junior stage, with graduate students and people that they're working with. Isabel is an example where one of her star pupils has gone into medicine, and she did a summer studentship with us last year. She got the top prize in the Brain Sciences Program, and she discovered some really interesting findings on this white matter disease. We were also interested now through collaboration with machine learning expertise, Dr. Magid Gubran, who's a medical biophysicist. We were able to turn our ground truth from Sunnybrook dementia study, where we had these properly acquired scans. We could turn it into machine learning. So we now know how to make a volume, learn what the volume of hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that is important for memory formation, and to some extent storage. And it used to take us like 3 hours to trace it to try to get a full idea of what it was on one side. So 6 hours per brain. Now we can do it in 90 seconds. And actually, Christiana did her summer student project combining white matter disease and also a project where we can do amyloid PET imaging. And she found out that the amyloid, which is the disease process in Alzheimer's disease, was associated with shrinkage of the hippocampus. But the white matter disease was associated with the shape of the hippocampus, because we're also looking at the shape. So this led to some really novel information that's going to be, I think, hopefully published in a very prestigious journal for a summer student, right? So that's the kind of, but she's very knowledgeable because of the work she did with Isabel as well, right? Now she's applying it in medicine. And to me, it's just like wonderful to have, such bright people, Jenny as well, everybody, where we are actually actively collaborating. And Amy, Moira Caprell has been collaborating. Actually, she has a cross appointment at Sunnybrook, believe it or not, because of the work that she does with ICES. And you need anybody that can help, right? So we were able to standardize these protocols and turn them into machine learning applications that are free and now allow us to find out more quickly what's happening in people. And because we are in the formation of, this has been taken a new step by something called the Toronto Dementia Research Alliance. I would just like to mention it briefly, because it's a bit of a flagship program in Toronto. We've all got major university hospitals. They're all very successful in what they do. But we're like kind of a bunch of brothers and sisters who have a lot of sibling rivalry, and we all compete with each other as well as collaborate. So in the Toronto Dementia Research Alliance, we collaborate, and we all collect a standardized a letter for a way we assess people, and a letter. If they agree, we share it on something called brain code. We have now got a standardized imaging protocol, and we developed a cognitive assessment that takes about 35 minutes all together with all of the different partners in this partnership, which includes Baycrest, Sunnybrook, CAMH, University Hospital, that is Toronto Western, and University Unity Health, which is St. Mike's. Together, we see 2,000 new patients a year. And when we start to put that together, Amy, that's 10,000 people in 5 years. And we can track them through their healthcare journey in a way that's really unique. I wish everybody would do it at the University of Toronto, because we could all learn so much more. But it takes a certain willingness to, it has to be supported by each of the hospitals, but it takes a willingness to share and collaborate. And I think that really is the way forward. We learn from our patients, we give back to our patients, and we try to improve care. Now, I know it's a rough time because of the pandemic, and we're short of everybody and everything, but still, this is the way forward, I think, because we're a big country, but a small population. Our funding, by comparison to the United States, is, dare I say, pathetic, would you say, Jenny, or Amy, or Isabel? Pathetic. And without philanthropy, we could do nothing, frankly.
Well, there's so much to unpack in that answer, Dr. Black, but the theme of collaboration, I mean, I know I've seen it across Sunnybrook and I hear about it all the time. I know how important it is across the sector, but hearing that example tonight from the dementia study, I think that's really hopeful, gives me a lot of hope, and maybe your little call to action today will encourage others to participate. I'd love to move now on to you, Dr. Aubert, maybe to share some more insight into your work.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing your expertise and your project, because when we all hear about each other too, we're getting excited. And I see some comments in the chat that are coming on, do you work on this? Do you work on that? And we don't have time to cover it all, but I would love to get back to that. So for all of the disease, one of the big challenges is how can we get therapeutics to the brain? How can we deliver therapeutics from the blood to the brain without doing brain surgery? So most therapeutic cannot cross what we call this blood-brain barrier. So I started at Sunnybrook in '98, and around 2006, there's Dr. Clervaux Kinnanen, who joined Sunnybrook Research Institute, and he's a pioneer in focused ultrasound. And these are sound waves that you can apply to the cranium, and they gently disrupt this blood-brain barrier, and you can put therapeutic in the bloodstream, and then they will pass through the blood-brain barrier into the brain upon the application of those sound waves. So I thought, wow, if we could do that, this would be great. So that's how our collaboration started. And I saw in the chat somebody ask about the big moment in brain research, like what's a big aha moment, the excitement. And I think one of the discovery that gave me the greatest excitement to date, and there's many of them, is actually to find out that not only we can deliver therapeutics to the brain, but this gentle modulation that is very brief with the sound wave can actually induce regenerative mechanism in the brain. So we found that we can have new cells that are born, that are neurons. The astrocyte, another type of cells, was able to clear up the amyloid plaque and get rid of it. And all of these regenerative processes were just like super exciting. And that's what I spend most of my last 15 years working on now, and it keeps going. So this technology, combined with what we know about the brain and how it can be modulated and have some regenerative capacity, is really like offer great possibility for many disorders of the brain. So that's what I work on most of the time. Yes.
Fascinating. And Dr. Rabin, would love you to share your story now, a little bit more about your work and where the breakthroughs are coming.
Yeah, thank you. So my research focuses on two main areas. So I'll pick up where Dr. Aubert left off, which is on focused ultrasound. So I am the lead neuropsychologist in the Neuromodulation Center. And here we investigate novel direct-to-brain interventions for difficult to treat disorders. So the interventions that we use include focused ultrasound, but also include deep brain stimulation, as well as something called repetitive TMS. And we use these techniques to treat a variety of disorders. So things like essential tremor, Alzheimer's disease, and Parkinson's disease. And my role in the center is to figure out how these treatments affect our memory and thinking abilities. So when we think about these treatments for depression, we want to make sure that these treatments are safe and not impacting memory and thinking abilities. But when we think about our treatments for Alzheimer's disease, we want to make sure that our treatments are impacting memory in a positive way. And then another area of my research focuses on Alzheimer's disease and specifically identifying risk and protective factors for Alzheimer's disease. And so we recently launched a large-scale study that focuses on Canadian ethnic groups that have traditionally been excluded from dementia research. And so we're focusing on individuals of East Asian as well as South Asian descent, since these are some of the largest ethnic groups in Canada and have really been understudied. So our participants in these studies undergo quite a bit of testing. So they have blood work, a brain scan, and we do a lot of memory and thinking tests with them. We're also monitoring their physical activity and their sleep with wearable devices. And so all these data are going to contribute to us better understanding risk and protective factors in these ethnic groups. So we're hoping that we can learn ways to slow down the process, but also better understand what can speed up the process. And the end goal is really to continue to follow these people over time. So with additional funding, we're hoping we can do that, because really longitudinal data provides the best understanding from a scientific perspective.
Thanks so much, Dr. Rabin. Thank you, all of you. There's so much amazing work happening here at Sunnybrook, and also important to note, crossing over with other institutions across U of T and across Toronto or across Canada. For this next question, I think I'm going to go straight to Dr. Black, because she already started to touch upon it. And really the way I'm going to frame this question, Dr. Black, is how can we help? You know, for someone listening to this call, how can they make more of this research happen? How can they help influence more innovation? In your experience, what role does philanthropy play in inventing the future of healthcare and furthering all of this great work?
Well, it plays a very important role. For example, you know, this concatenation of the brain sciences in one building that's hopefully going to open up next year has really been stimulated by a donation, and then eventually it was awarded some extra funding or some funding from the government. So it really wouldn't exist if it wasn't for, you know, the first donation, and we still need more if anyone's interested. Because we got 3 floors and we'd like more floors, but anyway, that's another matter. And then there is the philanthropy we need to actually do our studies themselves, because we do get funding. We're very competitive as a group. Everybody here has a grant, you know, from if not Heart and Stroke, CIHR, or, you know, other agencies. And yet the money isn't really enough to do what you need to do. We also have students and fellows who help us do the research, but some of them get support, but some of them don't. So you need, you know, funding to help support the next generation. And all of this is, I would say, not as well serviced in Canada as in other countries, compared to European countries, even the UK, and certainly the United States. So we struggle a bit more just to make ends meet. It doesn't mean that we're not inventive. We're doing good stuff. We collaborate sometimes with our colleagues in the States, but we really do depend on it more than I would like to admit. And that can be everything from small donations to larger donations. And that's because, you know, just the government grants don't fund how the work that needs to be done. I do want to say something else, though, apart from money, and that is also, we depend on volunteers whom they may be donating their time or donating being in a study where we might learn from their brain. For example, Dr. Rabin is depending on individuals who are from South Asian origin or East Asian origin and so on, are coming in and doing things, right? They're having scans, they're being tested, they might be giving blood. And so that's how we start to learn more about ethnic differences. And on Toronto, in Greater Toronto area in particular, we have many ethnic groups. In Canada, 250 ethnic groups, according to the recent statistics, and 170 languages, which is amazing, right? So people can also help in our studies by volunteering, and usually we don't pay them a lot. In some places they get paid, but we do it. It's their giving of their time. I think we pay parking, so they're not out of pocket. But people also give by giving of their own selves in these various. Because we need to know what's normal, we need to know what's not normal, and sometimes some of that comes through the clinic, but also without volunteerism, which might be actually it's also people who bring somebody to the appointment, who may be a friendly volunteer because somebody doesn't have a partner. So these are all ways that people can contribute, not just monetarily. But I'll be honest that we really need the extra funding to be able to advance even further what we're trying to do. And we're very successful in the agencies that are available to us. but they don't cover a lot of the operating. They sort of assume you've got a stable operating system. And for us, the Center for Brain Resilience and Recovery, it's really helping to fund highly qualified personnel that are not covered in any other way through the studies. They expect you to have that, but we don't.
No.
And without them, we can't do a good job. And they make a huge difference to us in making sure that we're doing everything right and complying with all the right things. So the other thing is it helps through, we have some people who have funded, sort of postdoc fellowships. And without the postdoc fellowships, we can't function the way we need to in the clinic and also in our research. But in the clinic, they help us see more patients. They help us do it well. And it's also training the next generation of neurologists, cognitive neurologists and stroke neurologists. All the people like Amy is doing that all the time. And we are in a transformational moment. I just want to say this before we finish, because we now are in an era where we have blood tests that will tell you have Alzheimer's disease. And we're moving along, being able to maybe recognize some other proteins that misfold in the brain and then cause trouble. So we're getting towards precision medicine. We have PET scans that will allow you to know that you have amyloid in the brain. And actually, the Ontario government has just agreed to pay for some of those. Up till now, we did not have access to that. So that's because we now have some treatments that might actually be effective in removing the amyloid or moving the tau or blocking the tau or doing something that's going to actually make the disease progress more slowly. We're even doing a trial where normal volunteers, people who are cognitively normal, but they may have a family history or a risk of Alzheimer's disease, are agreeing to be tested. And then if they do have the signs of Alzheimer's disease, which accumulates for 20 years before you know it, they're in a trial where we're going to try to remove that amyloid. And that's the other point I make, that people have to trust you. They have to trust you with their bodies, their minds, their souls. And we take that very seriously. And we take the best care we can of any of those individuals to make sure that they're still being cared for even when they're in trials. So I just want to say that it's more than just money.
Yeah.
It's also the people giving of themselves. Also the volunteers, take people to various appointments and so
Absolutely.
on. All of that is so important.
It's so important. Dr. Black, thank you for making a holistic case for the importance of philanthropy, but support, engagement, participation with Sunnybrook. It really is a community unlike any I've been involved with. As someone from the foundation, I know how talented this team is at accessing the funds that are available, but that important role philanthropy plays in sometimes seed funding, sometimes closing funding, sometimes building great big buildings, thanks to lead gifts and then the support of the community. So thanks for answering that. I know I've been just checking the chat. I know it was referenced earlier. Lots of questions are coming in. So I want to say thank you for going through those first questions. I'm now gonna start going to some of the audience questions. We're not going to get through them all. So let's try to keep our answers fairly tight where we can. And then we'll get through as many as we can. So this first question, heads up, Dr. Yu, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask you to answer it. Is how do research results enter into the treatment protocol?
Oh, that's a good question. So to start with research results, is we often want to see that these studies are being able to be replicated. Oftentimes, it's not like we act on only one study, and it has to be of the highest quality. And then oftentimes what happens is then we come together and update our guidelines. So I myself are on stroke guidelines that are written with the Canadian Stroke Best Practice Group. And so the guidelines are updated. And then there's also a lot of knowledge translation activities. So Dr. Black just mentioned there is a potential treatment, we need a certain scan. And so that needs to be communicated to our decision makers and the Ministry of Health. And so that's through knowledge translation activities, which is meeting with policymakers, educating clinicians, the people who are on the ground as to what are the new guidelines saying and why. Also working with administrators and hospital administrators, but also those who administer paramedic services, for example. So it's really through so many channels of having specific publications with what needs to be done, and also presenting, educating, and then the last piece is then, of course, measuring. How are we doing? Are we getting better? Is the message getting through?
I'm really glad someone asked that question, because that I didn't know, and that shows how much more work there is beyond the research to make something happen. Okay, heads up, this next question is going to come to all of you. I've already heard the word magic tonight. I've heard wow. We're going to build on that theme. What is your greatest moment in brain research or in brain sciences? Dr. Rabin, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, well, that's a big question. I think, I might just interpret that question in a different way than others up here might interpret it. And I would say that my biggest moment in brain research so far has just been getting my first few grants to get my research going, because it's so essential to get that early funding to get your projects off the ground. And so because of the funding I received, I've been able to start this multi-ethnic cohort. I've been able to execute research in the Neuromodulation Center. We've been able to look at memory changes in patients undergoing electroconvulsive therapy. And so really, I just feel like without that initial funding, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Fair. Okay, Dr. Aubert, over to you.
All right, I think I already mentioned, the first discovery when you look under the microscope as a research scientist, it's like, oh my God, like this is it, like the result. That's super exciting. Without the funding, we wouldn't have that. And then the next step is like our publication and the success of our trainees and where they go. And I have so many aha moments in different bucket of categories, I think. But and the collaborative success as well, when you come together and you make something happen that was not possible by one individual, which I think this is really, really rewarding as well as a team. So I'll stop there. I have too many.
Great theme today. All right. I'm gonna take a chance, and I'm gonna go, because I don't know that this is a fair question for you, Dr. Black. But if you had to pick just one, what would, and you can say pass if that's not a fair question.
Well, I mean, I think when TPA was kind of applied, discovered through all the testing that Amy is referring to, and it started to be that we could reverse a stroke, but it was time sensitive. That was a transformative time in the history of mankind. We should try to make it happen for everybody, but also preventing stroke is very important, and that's been part of the success of the system of stroke, especially in Ontario, where we also have a prevention system as well as an intervention system. That's gone a step further now that you can pull out a clot, right, Amy? It's like amazing. You can reverse a stroke.
Okay, that's a good.
People are normal, like it's amazing.
Yeah, that's a great, for a challenging question. That was a great answer, Dr. Black. Good call. So, Dr. Yu over, and your lights have gone out again. Dr. Yu.
There you go.
Yeah, well, I think that that procedure to pull out the clot has really reversed our way of also thinking about stroke. We now understand that not everybody with stroke has a clot in those same locations. It's really challenged us on how to better take pictures of the brain in people with stroke. And it's also taught us that not everybody reacts the same way when a blood vessel gets blocked. Some patients, their stroke progress really rapidly, but some other people, there's time to go in and save the brain from further injury. And I really had to share this with the group, but as I mentioned, it was during my fellowship where this project, the clot removal procedure, was shown to work. And the person leading it, his name is Michael Hill, and he recently just got the Governor General Award and the Order of Canada. And in one of his interviews with the radio. I listened to his interview, and he's my supervisor, and he said that project was actually shot down by CIHR 4 times. And it was really based that the project was only completed based on other funding that they were able to obtain with local funding or those catalyst funding that you mentioned, Christina, from philanthropy. And so, and I texted him because I listened to his interview, and he says, well, you know, CIHR has obviously supported him in so many other ways and supported his students, and including myself and other studies. But it's just so interesting that when Dr. Black said, CIHR is not enough, that's exactly it. Where sometimes there's just a really fantastic idea. There is an avenue that we need to pursue. And if we had no other options other than the governmental funding, our hands would be tied. And I think that there will be discoveries that we can't make.
You never know. I mean, and not all research works, and we need to be willing to invest in these questions. So that's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. Okay, we're making great time. Huge shout out to all of you on how you're going through these questions. So I've got a couple more teed up if we've got time. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Rabin. Are there patients, family, or caregivers, actually this is just for you, involved on your research teams? I'm just going to take this one just to you. You can.
Patients, families, or caregivers involved in the research team? Thank you for asking that question. This is something I've been spending a lot of time thinking about. Over the last little bit, we've reached out to several patients to help us advise on our research. So how can we make sure that we're doing research that is optimal for our patients? And we can't know that unless we involve patients and their families. So we're aiming to do this both in the Harquail Center, where we can have patients advise on our studies, as well as in the multi-ethnic cohort, where we can have patients and community members also being advisors and working with us as equal collaborators on our studies. And if anyone out there is interested in such a position, please feel free to reach out to me. I can make that plug.
Could I just add to that, Christina, quickly?
Yes, go ahead.
Because one of the requirements, this is again important for people to know, one of the requirements for participation in the studies we're now doing to try to disease modify Alzheimer's disease, these antibodies that you remove, or there's several, we've got 13 trials going on right now, requires a partner. They have to have somebody who can talk about who they are, how they're doing, what's been happening, etc. Probably because these are individuals who might have some, memory problems. But even in the folks who are normal, and that's because you need to hear from significant others. And if people don't have that, sadly, they can't be in the trials. Just like they can't have certain things called like microbleeds. So I think human connection is essential for most of these studies. And that is having somebody that you can count on. And so it sort of reminds us also how much we need each other, especially during the pandemic. And the pandemic has been a difficult time for everybody, but you can't do this. We can't even help people alone without somebody who can support them. I think it's a very important point.
Okay. Thank you for chiming in on that, and thank you for the plug, Dr. Rabin. I've got one last question. I'm going to try to get to all of you. I'm going to start with you, Doctor. We might do this one alphabetical again, depending on how time goes. What could healthcare delivery for brain diseases like Alzheimer's look like in 5 or 10 years as we continue to advance precision medicine? Great questions, whoever's writing these in, but great questions. So Dr. Aubert, Dr. Black, and then we'll see if we have time for everyone else.
Well, I think for Alzheimer's disease, the drugs are getting better, that we can now deliver them better to the brain. If I had to 5 years, maybe I'll let Sandra talk to that as well. 10 years and more, one thing that is up and coming is gene therapy. How can we see early what genes are responsible and how we could start changing genes and give the brain a fighting chance with one delivery and a lifetime of therapeutic benefit. So that's the way of the future. And maybe I'll pass on to Sandra for what's coming soon.
Well, even for something like the focused ultrasound, you know, that Dr. Heinen is trying to work on this helmet that would be personalized for each person so that you wouldn't have to be the scanner when you're giving the infusions or giving the injections or whatever. And it would deliver to appropriate regions with a much greater efficiency. Right now, about, you can correct me on this, Isabel, about 0.1% or 0.5% of the antibody actually gets through the blood-brain barrier without help. So we're giving these drugs and a lot of it is being wasted. So the idea of having more efficient ways to get through the blood-brain barrier is very important. But the other thing is, I think there will be new developments. We're currently trying to figure out how to remove these different proteins. But they're along the same line as gene therapy. There might be vaccines to some of these proteins, more specific than vaccines that were tried like 25 years ago. And that may mean you would vaccinate people against people who are at risk for Alzheimer's disease, for example. You would vaccinate them so that they'll start the protein problem in the first place. Although even why the proteins are forming is not entirely clear. It might be a reaction to infections, to various injuries, to vascular injury, and so on. But it becomes injurious as opposed to beneficial, probably because of aging. So I think that there will be some new ways of delivering, new things to deliver, and that we're looking, because we can do blood tests now to know how the person's doing, and that they have the disease. That's game changing in my view.
Great, thank you. We are almost at time, but Dr. Rabin or Dr. Yu, the thumbs up if you want to come off, if you have 30 seconds to add to that, or.
I can just add one tiny thing that builds on what was previously said, and it's really that earlier is better. And so I think right now we're really treating at the symptomatic stage. And I think in the next 5 years or even earlier, we're going to move to asymptomatic people. So before you even have memory problems.
That's almost too late.
Wow.
Amy.
Okay. Dr. Rabin, last word.
Well, I was just going to say there's a lot about therapeutics, but putting on my health services hat, it's about also individualizing health service provision. And so I love seeing that telemedicine and virtual care, for example, is, having a spotlight these days with the pandemic is, I think, a silver lining, because finally we are being able to reach further into, getting specialty care into more rural areas without having all the traveling. So I think we have to think about personalized care from how we deliver care as well.
Good point. Great point.
Excellent point. All right, I've been pushing my luck in terms of time, but I just want to hear more and more from all of you. So I want to say thank you to our panelists. It's been a fantastic discussion. You've got such great energy, such great work, and the connection between all of you is amazing, inspiring. I want to say thank you to our audience, because those questions were amazing, and I know there were a lot more, so I apologize we couldn't get to more of them, but I thank you for your support and for being here and for your participation. As you heard tonight, the future of brain and mental health is exciting, exciting. There's lots of exciting potential, and that future is already happening here at Sunnybrook in collaboration with others. That collaboration was such an important theme, and part of that collaboration is all of you as our donors and our supporters and our volunteers and our patients. This exciting work is only possible with your partnership, with your collaboration, with your support. When you respond to our bold vision, you put up your hand and you say that you're here with us. So thank you. Supporting this work is critical. I love the little shout outs for support tonight. So thank you. Supporting this work is critical to the health of everyone and for everyone with a brain. I hope you'll all take some time during International Women's Day tomorrow to reflect on the work of these amazing women, these amazing panelists, but also to feel proud about your own role as a donor and your support of our research, of this work, of this team, and the training of the next generation of leaders in brain sciences. They're here on the screen tonight, and they're bringing along so many more along with them. So thank you very much.
Christine?
Thank you, panel. And yes?
Christine, there were questions we're asking how people could contact somewhere if they wanted to volunteer in the Q&A. Is that something that you can reach out back to people? Because
You know what,
must be.
we can include that in our follow-up communication with this to
the
participate.
Q&A, they were asking, where do I call? What do I do?
Okay, so we'll look at how we can share that information broadly as we circle back and share this panel. This will be recorded and available online, and there will be a follow-up communication. So we'll make sure we include some of that information. Thank you very much.